Hi everybody, it's Suzanne in Ohio. Well, I'm back with our first step in our bird kit. This is video number 2, and what we're going to do today is the color enhancement, and that is on our pre-printed image that we're going to turn into a textile art bird. So I talked in the last video about many things. If you're interested in this process, you might want to go back and see that first video. But today we're going to jump right into how are we going to add extra color to this image so that we can prepare it for adding fabric and slow stitch on top of it. Now, if you're going to cover the whole thing with stitching or with fabric, there's no need to do this step. But if you want some of the original background image to show through, I think it needs to be a little bit brighter. At least for me, I want it brighter. And we talked before about the 3 things that we can use, or that we're going to address to use to add more color to this. And I listed Inktense, crayons, and craft paints. And the reason I chose those 3 is we have to add little or no water to this. I don't want to get this fabric too wet because this print is off of an inkjet printer. It is printed right on fabric and it has been heat set, but nothing says that moisture wouldn't make the image bleed out. Although if you're going to turn it into an applique and cut it out, it won't matter if it bleeds outside the lines. But I don't want to make that decision right now, so I'm going to be careful how I color this. Now, the 3 options, again, crayon. I showed how I had sampled some crayon on the corner of this fabric, and there was no crayons bright enough or brighter than the yellow that was already on here. So for this particular bird, I'm going to add 2 different things so that you can see how they work. I'm going to add some Inktense and I'm going to add some craft paint. I can get more brilliance with the craft paint. You'll see how that works here in a minute. But if you've never seen any of this done, I want to start out with a couple sample pieces. So I want to show you here. I have these 2 teapots that I had worked up some time ago and I never finished them. You can see that I started to put some flowers on this one, but let me see if I can get my camera to come down. No, it's not going to. I'm going to lower my camera. Bear with me here just for a minute. Sorry, did not think of this ahead of time, but I didn't. So there you have it. I don't have a professional setup. I'm just working with what I have, so bear with me. So I had started this teapot, and I put this orange on here, the blossoms, with some, I believe that was Inktense. Maybe it was acrylic paint. I'm not sure now. Anyways, what we're going to do is put some crayon on one of them so that you can see how that works, and put some Inktense and craft paint on another one. So let's start out first with some simple information here. If you're going to color something that is, or with crayon that's on fabric, you have 2 options. You can, like this sample piece, you can iron it to freezer paper, shiny side against the fabric. That way that tiny bit of wax on that freezer paper will pretty much hold your fabric in place while you rub the crayon over it. That works. If you have access to a piece of sandpaper, that works as well. So I have a fine grit sandpaper here, and all I did was spray baste it to a piece of cardstock. I don't need it to be real thick because I'm going to lay it on a hard surface anyway. But what that does is hold your fabric in place so that when you're pushing your crayon across the top of it, it doesn't stretch the fabric out. So since these orange flowers are light, and I know that my crayon coloring will be light, I'm going to put the crayon on this one and a little bit of Inktense on the other one. And I've got a full box, 64 crayons, and Crayola is the brand you want because there's more pigment in those crayons. Now we're just talking school crayons. Some of the off-brands have so much wax and very little pigment, you won't get a lot of coloring. So what do I want to color on here? The leaves and the branches. So the leaves are good enough to start with, and I want to choose a green that, 2 or 3 different greens to give me some dimension in those leaves. And this is simply coloring book style coloring. And then what you'll do after you put the color on is take it to the iron and heat set it in. Put a piece of parchment over the top of it or a paper towel. I don't believe you'll have any excess wax coming off. But since it's going to be an art piece and it's not going to be through the washing machine, it really doesn't matter if you just leave all the wax in it. There's so very little. So the first thing I'm going to do is put on a second pair of glasses, and I'm just going to put color on each of these leaves. And I want to do them all pretty similar to each other. I want to have the same kind of look all over the piece. I don't have to put each color in the same place. And as you can see, just get some pigment on there. This is extremely light and probably isn't showing up very good on the camera. And I don't want you to have to sit here and watch me color and paint. So that one is so light that I'm not going to use the next lighter one. I'm going to back down and get a couple different greens. So here's a darker green, and that's almost into the blue-green shades. So I'll just add a little bit to some of the leaves, not much, because I want to keep that light springy look. Now keep in mind we're creating a foundation on which we can overstitch, or if you like the term slow stitch better, that's fine, but we're overstitching in a slow stitch manner. Too much these days, the word slow stitch really is kind of the shishiko or the Boro style stitching. But any kind of hand stitching is slow stitching. And we don't need to make it more complicated than it really is. Okay, 2 shades of green, and where I've overlapped them, they've already created another color. I'm going to put just a tiny bit of a spring grass green in there on each one. Now you can do this as artistically as you want or as simple as you want, because a lot of this isn't going to show after you stitch on top of it. This is a foundation. So let's see, something for the stems. I've got a burnt sienna here, raw sienna, And I'm going to put just a little bit of that brown in each part of the stem, but then play it down a little bit. I should say branches. And then let's switch to a different shade of brown. Here's a chestnut. Now that's a slightly reddish brown. That'll be a strong pigment. I don't want much of that. And I want to be sure and save some room on my fabric to get some gray, because there are gray tones in almost all branches, and even some green. So we'll put some of that in there too. So I have a couple grays here. And it's such a light gray, even though it's called medium, you're not going to notice it very much. Now there's another way you could use an image like this, and that is to turn it into an embroidery project. There's lots of embroidery that is color enhanced out there on the internet, and it is so cute. You might want to consider doing that. I'm going to find a gold here and just put some gold in the center of these flowers. Okay, now I could continue on and color the picture, and maybe I will smear a little bit of color on there. So what would be a good background color for this image? I always want to think about complementary and split complementary, because I don't want the whole thing to start looking muddy. But these are kind of a light orange. Complementary to orange is, let's see, blue. So we could do a very light blue background. Here's a nice shade of blue. Let's color a little bit of the picture without filling it all in. A little bit darker around the edges, lighter toward the inside. When I was a little girl, I colored all of my coloring books by outlining them. And sometimes I wouldn't even fill in the inside of the picture. And I think my mom thought I was wasting my coloring books. So that's another story in another lifetime. Yes, that's a beautiful color with all those other tones. So we want to just put some smeary blue light inside these void areas. And then if I were to use this for an embroidery project, I would have some substance in there. Now, when you take it to the ironing board and iron it, the color will melt into the fabric. And then you can even put a second layer on if you want to. I've never wanted to do anything quite like that, although maybe that's an avenue I should explore. But push medium hard with your Crayola and get some color on there. There is they say when you heat set your crayon, and people do a lot of it, you can even use your pieces in quilts and then go through the washing machine. There really isn't that much wax in them. So don't worry about any of that. There, we have a nice blue. I'm going to turn this just so it's easier for me to color. Put some color on this handle. And again, you can choose this to add some more color to your bird if you want to. I just want to expose you to all of your options. I love to know what all my options are, and then I will figure it out myself. Now, you won't believe how this will come alive with embroidery around all these lines, because you won't be choosing exactly the same color of floss, and then you'll get more variation and more interest. Okay, so that's how simple it is to color with crayon. You can heat set that and then add more color if you want, or use it as a embroidery project. Okay, so on this one, we don't need the sandpaper anymore. We'll just work right here and put these crayons away. I won't do this whole thing. I just want to show you, if you've never seen how Inktense goes on fabric and how you melt it in. I watch a lot of videos, but I'm telling you, some of them are spot on, and some of them have so much incorrect information in them. Inktense, people call them a watercolor. They're not a watercolor. They are a concentrated ink pigment. Ink and watercolor have two different kind of pigments in it. This is ink, concentrated ink, but it has to be activated to sink into the fibers, and then once it's dry, it becomes permanent. And that's the beauty of it, permanent. Now, after it's dry, then you can even add other colors over top of it. So let's just do this little bird. I pulled out a couple colors for the breast and all the blues. And the thing about Inktense, there's many videos out there, but the girl who did the artwork on the outside of the tins for Derwent, she has the best video because she knows the product like the back of her hand. So you should look that video up and watch her, and she'll tell you everything about that you ever need to know about the Inktense. It can be activated with water. That would be for paper. If you activate it with water on fabric, it's going to bleed out into the fibers. So there's two other ways you can activate it, and many ways that you can apply it. But the way I use is aloe vera, because it's an all-natural product. It dries, and it doesn't change the hand of the fabric. So we've got an assortment of blues here, and it's hard to do a true bluebird blue with the Inktense. They're just not the right color, and I haven't found the right combination, but it doesn't matter. This is a practice, and we're going to see how it works. Let me find my cursor and see if I can get this camera. Bear with me a second. No, I have to have this looked at. I cannot figure out why I can't get my camera to come down. So the breast on a typical bluebird would be a rusty color, but I'm going to enhance it a little bit, and I'm just going to lay my pencil sideways and gently rub across this fiber and put some pigment on that. And then here's a more rusty color. That first one was more reddish, and this is more rusty color, and just put that on there real light. You'll think it's real light, but once it's activated, it really brightens up. Now his underbreast is mostly white, so we're going to leave that alone, and we're going to just put the blue where we think it should go. And my pencils are sharp, and I don't want to put any hard lines on my fabric. You probably cannot even see what I'm putting on here, because you can't see it and hardly until it's activated. And I have learned that it continues to dissolve and activate for about 5 minutes even after you finish. The color changes. So we'll put some blue there, and we'll put some on his wing. I'm just holding the fabric because I'm pulling the pencil against the fabric. And some on his tail. And it doesn't have to be real neat because it kind of moves around as you activate it. Now that's one shade of blue. Do I want to add another one just to give it some interest? I'll put another shade, let's say at the bottom of his wing here. It may or may not be effectual, but we'll give it a try. Put some here on the tip too, and out on the tip of the tail. And let's see, should the top of his head be a little darker? Just for definition. Okay, now I know that sure doesn't look like a lot, but when we put the aloe vera on it, it's going to. I'm checking my minutes here. I don't want to take this video too long. I'm going to mush my brush around in the aloe vera because if you don't push it around in there, it just lays on the outside of the bristles. So I want to get my brush thoroughly saturated with it. And I'm just using any old brush. And basically what I'm doing is adding this aloe vera to the fabric enough to wet that ink and get it activated. And I hope you can see how it's coming alive. There you go. I'm so sorry that I cannot get my camera lens down closer. Before I make the next video, I will resolve that. And I'm putting some aloe vera out here on his tail and keeping my brush to a point. Getting fresh aloe vera on it, and basically you're buttering it on there. You're buttering it on, and if I have a lot of Inktense on my fabric, I will use a stiffer brush, which is a cheap brush made for acrylics, because it has a stiffness to it, and I can work that those bristles and work that ink into the fiber. Now there's many other ways you can work with Inktense. We're not going to go into those. It would be too long and it's not going to affect what we're doing. But I just want you to see how it works. And this is how I painted the 4 images that are in the kits. This is the original one. I packed it away already, but this is a copy of the original Goldfinch. As well, all 4 of them I did with Inktense. Okay, so we have crayon, we have Inktense, now we have, I'll bring this back here in a few minutes so you can see how it darkens up. Now we have our actual image, and we want to take it off of the batting because we don't need it on there for this, and we don't want anything to go through on our batting. We're just going to lay it down, and now we're going to add some craft paint to this because I know for sure that I want a brighter image to work on. I may or may not choose to put a complete coverage of stitches or fabric over top of this. So I'm going to get some color on there so it looks the way I want it to look. And then if I cover it up, fine. But if I don't, then I've already got it taken care of. Let me rinse my brush out. I'm going to use the same one because I love the bristles on this brush. Now we want a thin layer, and since my paint is pretty new and pretty runny, I don't need to do anything extra to it. I'm going to start out very cautious. Since my brush was damp, I'm going to work the paint into the bristles and then clean them off pretty good. I have a medium amount of paint on there, and I'm just going to start adding it right to the fabric. And as I get more confident about how it's acting, I can add more and more. Craft paints and student paints and the yellows don't have a lot of pigment in it, so I can really load it up as long as I feel confident that it's not bleeding. I feel pretty sure that I do not want to do a lot of stitching on his face. So, nothing says you can't put 2 layers of this on. Let the first one dry and then put another layer. Although I don't think I will. I'm kind of liking the look of that. And you don't have to worry about stitching through it. There's not enough polymers in this to jam up your fabric. You won't have any trouble hand stitching right through this, even with the paint on it. So think about your image that you have. Do you want to add more color before you move on to the next step? I'm going to go ahead and get this on here quick so it can be drying, and I'll do his beak because I know I want that a little brighter. I hope you've thought about what kind of style you want to execute your piece in. I've been thinking about it. I'm going to try to get a more whimsical look. I'm going to use fabric and overstitching and get a look that's a little less restricted than I usually do. I'm going to put some paint right here in this area, and that's good enough. That'll dry real nice and it's brighter, and I like the tones in it. It's not totally flat. Now I'm going to get a pointy brush to do his beak, and for that I'm going to add a tiny bit of orange to my yellow because their beaks, I don't want an orange, but more like a tangerine color. So mix a little bit of those together and brighten up his beak a little bit. Have a hair there. And if you go outside the lines while you're painting, don't worry, because when he's finished, he's going to be cut out and applied to your surface as an applique. Okay, that's how you would apply your craft paint, your Inktense, or your crayon to super enhance your image before you go on to the next step. Now, in the next step, what we will do is we're going to put it back on the foundation and we're going to baste. And there's a specific way of basting to keep it from stretching while you're working on it. Very few people, I think, know that. I want to share it with you. It'll come in handy for the rest of your life if you're a sewer. It's basically done with a stitch that's a sort of a back stitch, and I use a fly stitch, and I always make sure I'm going against the way I put, well, never mind all that gobbledygook, because you won't understand it until I have time to show it to you. Okay, here's our little Inktense bird, and I believe all of the ink is melted. Once it's dry, it'll be permanent. If I see any spots that I don't think excuse me, got activated, I can just put more aloe vera right on top of it. Now, can you see how cute he would be embroidered all the way around the edge and a few accent stitches here and there? Lovely, lovely. And again, the crayon. All right, so thank you for watching. I hope you're stitching and thinking about our next step, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks for tuning in. Bye from Suzanne in Ohio.